Good morning, everyone. I am Catherine Hodgkinson, Manager for Education and Professional Development here at FIA, and I will be your MC today. Firstly, we'd like to welcome you all to our April webinar presentation, which is focused on using neuroscience to improve your fundraising results. So we're happy to have you join us. Just before we get started, the FIA webinar series is a member benefit, which means that members attend these webinars free of charge, which is another great reason for you to be a member of FIA. So if you're not a member, go to the FIA website at fia.org.au and renew your membership or join for the first time today. A special thanks to our webinar and FIA sponsor, Go Fundraise, for their financial and in-kind support of FIA throughout the year. We will place a recording of today's webinar presentation in the members area of the FIA website for you to have after this session. We will also email a link to the recording to all who have registered for today. Our presenter will take questions at the end of the webinar presentation. So if you have a question, please submit it in the question box on your screen. Today's webinar is being presented by Simone Joyo. Simone is an advanced certified fundraising executive in the US, and she's from Joyo Associates. Simone's expertise is in governance, fundraising, and planning. She is a consultant, author, and worldwide presenter, a university faculty member, board member, and is often a chair. Simone is also an NGO founder, donor, and uncensored change maker. She is an asker of cage-rattling questions and has been described as one of the most thoughtful, inspirational, and provocative leaders in the philanthropic sector. Simone, we are delighted to welcome you and we thank you for presenting today.
Well, you're most welcome. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So shall I start?
Great. Absolutely.
Right. So I'm kind of fascinated by this neuroscience thing. And I don't know how many of you may have had your head or body stuck in an MRI machine, but thanks to hospitals, the medical field, and MRI machines, people, doctors, etc., can watch what's going on in our heads. So by looking at what's going on in our heads, they ended up inventing this new science called neuroscience. And apparently, like, I've gone through an MRI machine myself, and I've had an MRI of my brain. But they didn't invite me to look at the results of the MRI. That would have been cool. Because apparently what happens is they can see when our brains light up and what part of the brain and all that sort of thing. So I know that those of you who are listening to this webinar who are experienced fundraisers and even the learning fundraisers, we know that emotions trigger most decisions in life. We keep thinking that we're being so rational, but it's not true. Emotions drive decision making. That's one of the basics of biology. And we might rationalize it a few seconds or a few minutes later, but it's really the emotions. So whether you're recruiting me as a board member, or you're writing a direct mail letter, or you're meeting me face to face and asking me for a gift, we pay attention to people's emotions. And in my world, in a database, we're writing down all those emotions, in the notes section. So we're saying, Simone is very angry about this, and she's more interested in that, and all that sort of thing. So there are two people in particular, two doctors, that I want to mention. And you will see references to Dr. Antonio Damasio, and then our next one, Dr. Antoine Bashara. And you'll see these mentioned in books by Tom Ahern and various other people who are talking about emotions. So as you'll note, Damasio talks about, at the point of our decision making, the emotions are what's most important. So even, as I was saying earlier, what we think is rational or a logical decision, it's mostly based on emotion. So an important thing for us to remember is that people are using their emotions, even when they don't know they're using them, so to speak, to make their decisions. Now, Bashar goes on and he sort of says, so what if, because we seem to think that rational decision making matters, but what are the implications if it's actually the emotional processing? So they did all kinds of research, oftentimes with people who had lost the functioning part, a certain functioning part of their brain, and could no longer process emotional information, and what are the implications for that, for decision making. So as we think about reaching out to current donors, right, or communicating with those that we hope might become donors, we have to be highly knowledgeable about the scope of emotions, if you will, that function in our world. So years and years ago, the Direct Marketing Association, they were early in research about fundraising. And I actually even have a bracelet that has engraved on it 7 top emotional triggers that work in direct mail. Now, this list is old, but it's not out of date. So I'm going to just list these for you, so you can write them down if you wish, and my guess is you'll mostly know them. So 1 is anger. A person is angry about something that is happening in her or his community or in politics or whatever, right? And that is an emotion they feel, and that feeling helps them make a gift. Fear. We really have to remember that fear is actually the most powerful emotion we have as human beings. And it stems from what Seth Godin, and if you don't read Seth Godin, you absolutely must. Seth, last name Godin. He has a daily free blog. But he refers to the lizard brain, the amygdala. And in general, that issue around fear is very simple. Will it kill me, or can I eat it? So biologically, our most critical emotion as human beings is, oh my gosh, we're taking a walk and the saber-toothed tiger is coming at me. Talk about a powerful emotion. So that when we think about nurturing relationships and we think about asking for gifts and engaging people, we're remembering anger, fear, greed. So what could greed be? We're not greedy for more money, not when we're talking about giving away money, right? So greedy can be, I want more good theater and dance in my community. So anger, fear, greed. How about guilt? Think about guilt. What do you feel guilty for? What do you think, well, there, but for the grace of these opportunities go I? All right, so anger, fear, greed, guilt, flattery. Don't your donors deserve to be flattered? Your donors of time or your donors of money? What does the thank you letter say but thank you? What does a direct mail letter say when asking for a gift except thank you for what you've done in the past? I hope you might consider another gift. So we've now got anger, fear, greed, guilt, flattery, exclusivity. Thank you, flattery, for your gift. You're part of a special group of people. Special group, exclusivity, helping to make this change. Anger, fear, greed, guilt, flattery, exclusivity, and salvation. And that salvation needn't be a faith, God, etc. salvation. It can be I volunteer my time and my money to help make change, and for me, that is my salvation as a community human being. So, we're thinking about neuroscience. We're thinking about these things that are happening. Now, apparently this Harvard marketing professor and author, Gerald Zaltman, talked about how we need to sell to 95% of our customers' brain. 95% of our thoughts, emotions, and learning occur without conscious awareness. We learned to run from the saber-toothed tiger. We learned to help because of that personal experience we had. Now, notice the term customer, because what I'm going to start talking about shortly is consumer research. So the for-profit sector is vastly ahead of our nonprofit sector, NGO sector, when it comes to researching customer motivations, customer actions, customer satisfaction. So I'm asking you to think in terms of, in our nonprofit sector, we have a number of different customer groups. We have our ultimate beneficiaries, right? The individuals or the families we're helping, or the trees that we're saving. Those are customers. In addition, our donors are our customers, stakeholders. In addition, our board members are our customers, stakeholders. So we are selling, in quotes, we are engaging with our customers, and the dominant portion of our customer's brain is thoughts and emotions, that sort of thing. I'm a huge reader, and I read significantly outside of the nonprofit sector, outside of the fundraising or governance or whatever field. And so I'm sharing with you right here on this slide, emotions number 4, a book called The Hidden Brain: How Our Unconscious Minds Elect Presidents, Control Markets, Wage Wars, and Save Our Lives. Shankar Vedantam is the science editor at the New York Times newspaper, which means he's a good writer, and he's writing about research and how the brain works. The hidden brain is the unconscious mind, which, again, runs when you see a saber-toothed tiger. And he's talking about how people's experiences and, again, how our minds, our brains, particularly the small one, the amygdala, small portion of the brain, the lizard brain, that unconscious mind can save our lives when we run away from the saber-toothed tiger, but it also can do bad things like, for example, in the West, in the Western world, so to speak, the norm is white and male. And so the unconscious mind is more comfortable with white and male. And if we want to move beyond that, then we have to look at the more conscious mind. So key here, customers' brains, donors' brains. So with that general background, if you will, number 1, that neuroscience proves that emotions are the major decision maker. Neuroscience proves that we've got the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, and they play together in some ways, and they may be diametrically opposed in other ways, and that we as fundraisers, as in people trying to get others to do something, need to pay attention to this. So as I said, consumer research is much more advanced, and there's much more of it than such research in the nonprofit sector. So several years ago, I discovered Roger Dooley. I'm not special because I discovered him. He'd already been discovered. But I bumped into him, so to speak, on the internet, and I fell in love with his neuroscience marketing newsletter. Because as I was reading these things that he's talking about, right, in consumer research, I'm thinking, I think that's the same in fundraising. That's probably the same in fundraising. So, in addition to reading people like Jeff Brooks and Tom Ahern and all of these people, and just by the way, if you don't know who your Colin Wheeldon is, Colin Wheeldon, Wheildon, he did major research on readability. And you'll find a lot of that reported in some of Mal Warwick's books and some of Tom Ahern's books about the impact just of the visual, the printed page, on our ability to consume, understand, etc. So anyway, I urge you to subscribe to Roger's NeuroscienceMarketing.com newsletter, because he'll talk about how consumers make decisions about certain things, and then it's your job and my job to link it, right? To link it to the nonprofit sector. So I've been reading his blog for a while, and then he had published this book called Brainfluence. Now, he says right there in Brainfluence, of course, there are conscious and rational parts in decisions, but marketers need to first focus on appealing to the buyer's, just substitute donors, emotions and unconscious needs. It's not always bad to include factual details, because the logical portion of the brain can justify the decision. But don't expect those factual details to make the sale, if you will, to make the donor choose to give. It's the other stuff. So, what I have put together for the rest of this is various sections of Dooley's book, Brainfluence. As I was reading it, I was thinking, ooh, that's why that seems to work in fundraising. Or, no wonder I was having trouble with that little bit of thing with those donors. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through some of these, and I'm going to ask you to think about, so what are the implications for fundraising? Now, if we were all in the same room, I'd be like pointing at you and saying, so answer that question. What does it have to do with fundraising? So here's the first one. Target boomers with simplicity. I'm a boomer. I didn't realize I needed to be targeted with simplicity, but hey, I'm looking at it here. So it's usually good advice for any kind of advertising to be kind of simple. The brain scans show a dramatic difference in the ability of my brain to suppress distracting information. So think about that for a moment. Just think about that. And why, before we actually think about the implications for fundraising, I want to, you'll notice the little silly note there if you're focusing on millennials or younger people. Let me rephrase, what is the average age of a donor? I'm hoping all your brains are saying 60 and up. I'm hoping that when one of your board members, or worse yet, your boss, says to you, we've got to get to those younger donors, I hope you're answering back, well, the thing is, younger donors like, say, millennials, they're starting their lives. Unless they're what? Facebooky, Zuckerberg. But otherwise, it sounds like you're starting your life. You're maybe paying off college debt. You're getting a job. You're buying a house. Maybe you're getting partnered up and having kids or whatever. Why is the average age of a donor 60 some and up? Because that's when we have disposable income. I was presenting at FIA live, the conference in, I don't remember what year, but let's pretend it was, 2014, 2015. And Sean Triner from Pareto was giving an update on philanthropy in Australia at the conference. And then he was talking about millennials versus older people. And he said, honestly, if you want to look at younger donors, then you can go down as far as 50, but no younger. So, an implication then for fundraising is the average age of donors is 60 plus. We're looking at baby boomers. Don't have a lot of distracting information because brain scans, so that's our MRIs, show a dramatic difference in the ability of older brains to suppress the distracting information. So what are the implications for fundraising? Well, I suppose one could be the donor-centered newsletter that you send out, print 6 times a year, maybe 5 times, but 6, the research says is better. And I guess that means not going to have a lot of emoji things running around. We're not going to have bunches, maybe of different type fonts. We're going to have some pictures, but not so busy that, the eye is just bouncing from picture to picture. I don't know. What are the implications for fundraising? Would it be interesting to look at a bunch of different things on the web, in print, whatever, and say, do we have some distracting information? Now, if you look at this slide, all right, just think about it a minute. On some level, isn't that smaller type? And if you're focusing on millennials or younger people, I'll have a fit. Isn't that like kind of distracting? So, number 1, we target boomers. Number 2, we target boomers with simplicity. Because my brain scan, contrary to perhaps someone who's on this webinar who's 30, my brain apparently has trouble suppressing distracting information. So that could be an example. I really liked this one. Buying causes the pain center in our brain to light up. So think about that for a minute. If the ouch of pain, so to speak, happens when I'm giving you a gift, what are the implications for fundraising? So, for example, would monthly giving, where we just sort of be regular and it's being taken out, right, either automatically deducted from our bank account or it's on a charge card, so I'm not noticing the pain, so the pain center in my brain isn't lighting up because it's not, I don't even necessarily notice. I don't know. What else? What else? Could it be, if we're asking someone to consider a gift that is larger than they usually give, or we're asking them to consider, let's say, 2 gifts at once for a capital initiative as well as regular program operating support. I don't know. Would it be better to combine those 2 figures into one? Or would it be better to say you can pay things, over a pledge period? But we've got to think about this. We have to talk about this. We have to try out, test different ways of this, because if there's this ouch of pain, which, again, I'm not questioning because I trust the research, buying something causes the pain center in our brain to light up. But if we counter that, right? So if you say to me when you're asking me for a gift, say for social justice or something in social justice. And you say, we know from talking with you so much, Simon, and your past, conversations with us and gifts that you give, that you're very committed to gender equity, that you actually use the word equity and not equality, because there is a difference. That you're very deeply committed to equity, gender equity, and to race equity. So here we've got flattery. Remember that emotion? We know you're trying desperately to make change. And because of your gift, change can happen, and we've seen it happen. And so we're wondering if you might consider a larger gift than you've given before. So, ouch, ooh, geez, pain center. But then you go on with, but because of you, there will be salvation. Because of you, there will be change. And so are we pairing the ouch of pain with the reduction of that ouch? But we certainly should know that there can be this ouch of pain. So let's see, you buy the new iPhone and there's like, a little bit more expensive than I've been hoping. But then, of course, they're showing you all the cool things it's doing, and then you go home and you do more cool things, and hey, ouch of pain, gone. But again, it's something for us to think about. Now, here's a really, I'm really thinking about this one. Okay, there are multiple pain points. And so you and I, as fundraisers, have to minimize those pain points, the customer's pain, the donor's pain. So we should always try to avoid multiple individual pain points in the asking process. So I've suggested with the last slide, right, that we make sure we're partnering the ouch of pain with the reaffirming emotions of flattery, exclusivity, assuaging your own anger, etc., right? And that we should, as we're planning the solicitation, to try to avoid multiple pain points. So maybe some of this, as an implication for fundraising, is something as simple as scheduling. So presumably we're worried about scheduling, right, or paying attention to scheduling at all times. Anyway, so you don't send out your third direct mail letter of the 12-month period right about or within a couple of weeks of the time you send out the invitation to your really cool special event, right? Because they both cost money. Too much money asking within maybe a month's period or something. So let's think about that. Let's think about balancing for every pain moment of writing that check. We're trying to make them feel like, but it's not that painful. Then I get that thank you call from a board member telling me what a hero I am. And then I get that really cool article in the donor newsletter, which talks about bunches of us having been heroes who helped change the lives of those children. But I like knowing and being conscious of the fact that there is neuroscience research that tells me that this is true. And maybe by knowing this, right, I will be able to think, plot, and plan better. So I hope you're seeing how some of these things can help us understand some of the things that are going through the brains of our donors or prospective donors. Not that they necessarily know this either, remember? A whole lot of this is the unconscious mind. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a whatever story. For anybody on the phone who has a relationship, a personal, intimate relationship where you, live with somebody or whatever. And have you ever been having an argument or something, and you say blah, 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 and the other person says to you, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it. Okay? So there's all sorts of research from the neuroscience to a guy from, I think it was Stanford, Dr. Mehrabian, Meherbin, something like that. Anyway, about the fact that it's not the words as much as it's the body, the gestures, the tone. So in my home, it is not uncommon, although I don't want to suggest that it's daily, okay, but it's not uncommon that I'll say something like, I don't know why you're so mad at me, Tom. I mean, all I said was blah, 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 blah. And then he'll say to me, yeah, but it's the way you said it. So, what are the implications for fundraising? I mean, just think about it. I was doing a presentation one time where I was talking about personal face-to-face solicitation and how this is, a wonderful way to nurture relationships with donors and a great way to ask for gifts, etc. And I had been presenting for probably about an hour. And if you've ever seen me present, I'm my body, my rings, my gestures, my movement, all are in some ways the way you hear me talking, okay? And so someone in the session said, I'm just not going to find any board members, and I can't myself talk the way you talk, and your voice rises, and then you've got all these emotions, and you're gesturing, and and plus, we could never find and nobody could do this. With someone in the workshop who was a client of mine, and she said, hey, we couldn't solicit half our donors behaving the way she does. She'd scare the hell out of them. So again, for an audience or a person, right, or a family that you're asking for a gift from, you have to mirror, right, and respond to their body talk, to their emotional content. And the best fundraisers, the best, friends, the best whatever, can respond to the person they are with and not only behave in one, way with two huge rings and hands moving all around and that sort of thing. Gestures help us decide what the words mean. So part of this is thinking about who's the right person to talk with that person about whatever, right? If you're collecting stories from donors about why they give and why they love you, you match up one of your board members, one of your staff colleagues with Bob and Mary as a partnership, and they need someone different than the Simon person does, or that the Don person does, or the Sarah person does. It's the gestures. It's the tone. Our bodies talk, and they outweigh the words. All right. More neuroscience takeaways. Free and new. Apparently, our little brains light up and start dancing when we hear the words or read the words free or new. There is research that I saw years ago that says that paper is better for emotions than, let's say, email. So right now, I've just picked up a piece of paper in my office, and I don't know if you can hear it, but I'm kind of crinkling it and holding it and rubbing it, right? Simple fonts spur action. Why? Why? I mean, some of those really complicated fonts are kind of cute. Simple fonts spur action. And if your graphic designer doesn't know that, get a new one. Because it's about readability. It's about ease of. Remember that emotion we were talking about, the fear one? I'm afraid of the saber-toothed tiger that's coming towards us. So, part of Brainfluence, part of neuroscience is creating an enemy. And then I, the hero, can destroy that enemy through my gifts. You and I have to know all of this kind of stuff. Because if we don't, we're not doing the best fundraising possible. And our job is to do the best fundraising possible. Now, it's not like you might not have a fight with your boss or your board chair. But if you learn this stuff, if you share this kind of thing with them periodically before you show them the new direct mail letter or the new newsletter or the new design of the way we're going to meet with people face to face, you get them ready by looking at this stuff. Now, I think of neuroscience as, when I say relatively easy, you understand, I'm not saying it because I'm doing it. But I find that the available information about neuroscience and its implications for something like fundraising, I can grasp it. I find, again, Roger Dooley's book, Brainfluence, as well as his neuromarketing.com newsletter to be absorbable, all right? We have people like Tom Ahern, Jeff Brooks, who write books about all of this. So I find that, again, I'm absorbing it. But here's a question for you. Psychology. So, what's the difference? I actually looked it up in Wikipedia, okay? So neuroscience is the study of the function of the brain. So the brain is an organ, and neuroscience, tries to describe it. So it's really it's the physical thing that is the brain. Pull it out, hold it in your hand, stick it in an MRI machine. So when I was reading in Wikipedia, it turns out that apparently neuroscience and psychology fight each other quite a bit. And so Wikipedia tells me that one might say the difference is there's only one neuroscience and a multitude of different psychologies. So if we look at the brain as a something like a hand, right? It's this physical thing. And we can describe it and follow it and, as I say, look at it popping up in MRI machines. But psychology isn't the study of the brain itself. It's the study of what's happening, behaviors, mental processes, etc. So now, as I say, I can sort of get the neuroscience stuff. But now we have to start paying attention to psychology too. I'm not saying you have to start studying it tomorrow, but we now have the world's first and still only philanthropic psychologist in a woman named Jen Shang. She's part of the Hartsock Center for Sustainable Philanthropy, which is in the UK. And she is developing programs and writing articles and telling us all of this stuff about the psychology of philanthropy. So just imagine, we're now at the point where we have enough neuroscience to be writing and communicating better and to understand our donors because of MRIs in the brain and all that sort of stuff, all right? We are now getting more information about psychology. So that can be the next thing we start learning about and thinking about. And then we can have the two of them together. And will that not be marvelous and cool? Because it's not to manipulate donors. It's to reflect their interests, their needs, their feelings. That's our job. And then we're hoping that they will want to give through us to fulfill their own aspirations. So, as a sort of a last little thing, there is, so you know the guy, Michael Lewis, who wrote the book about Moneyball, The Big Short, The Blind Side, bunches of these are movies, okay? So he writes in ways that the rest of us can understand if we're not scientists. So he has a book called The Undoing Project. And this is where these two psychologists, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, invented the field of behavioral economics. Amos died. Kahneman is still alive and still writing. And there's stuff we can learn there, too. If I were you, I'd start with the neuroscience. But next on my list is to read The Undoing Project and then Thinking Fast and Slow. So, with that, it's a, whirlwind tour, if you will. If you're doing a lot of this already, reading it, just keep going. If you're not yet, you have to. Because the thing that's happening is more and more professionals and nonprofits of any size are learning this stuff. And if you and I don't learn it, but they're learning it, then we're going to fall behind. You will notice my little disclaimer there. I'm not an expert in this. I know just enough to read stuff, to start applying some of it, and to challenge myself to doing more. So, do we have any questions? And not even questions, but even thoughts? Anyone?
Thanks, Simone. Many thanks for all that information. I was really intrigued by the research, especially around the pain center and minimizing pain points. And thank you too for the information or sharing the information with us all about the Hartsook Center. There's certainly things there that I'm going to look into myself.
Yeah.
we already do have just a couple of questions that have come in. So the first one here is from Lorraine, and she asks, how much do I really need to know about this stuff like neuroscience and emotions and psychology and the rest?
So, several answers to that. One, the one I just ended with, which is other people are learning this stuff. Some of the neuroscience stuff, it's old news. So Tom Ahern and I wrote about it in Keep Your Donors, and that was published in 2008, which means we were writing about it in 2007. It's a decade ago. To me, that's late to the party if we're not starting to think about this stuff or already thinking about it. Another reason, so Tom Ahern, so Tom is a donor communications expert, and he stomped into my office one day. So our offices are in our shared home. And he stomped into my office and he said to me, I don't know how the hell you fundraisers have ever raised any money. Actually, he didn't say fundraisers. He said, I don't know how the hell you people have ever raised any money. I said, which people? He said, fundraisers. I said, do share. And he said, I read more than 1,000 pieces of donor communications a year and most of it sucks. So I don't know how we're going to keep raising more money, if most of our donor communication sucks. All right? And then my third reason is we're still not a profession based sufficiently in academics as well as just practice. And shame on us if we don't get our asses in gear so that we are really, truly a profession, so we can stand up to the boss in the room who says, I don't like that, that's not my voice. And we as the competent fundraisers can say, let me explain to you why it has to be done this way, because that's the way it works. So there are some reasons.
Great. And Lorraine, thank you very much for sending us your question. If anyone else does have a question, if they can please enter their questions now into the question box on their screen, that would be great. We do have one here from Mark. How do I convince my boss that this stuff really matters?
So I think this is one of the largest problems we have in the sector, Mark. Again, it sort of links back to when you think about other professions, right? An accountant, a doctor. People don't question them. Your boss and your board members don't question the accountant who says, I'm sorry, but these are the government regulations. We assume doctors actually, went to school and studied stuff, and then they practiced on cadavers or whatever. So fundraising is still not seen, I think, as sufficiently as a profession. And then I also suspect that part of this has to do with our societies value the for-profit sector and the government sector more, and they behave as if the nonprofit sector was an afterthought, and that, let's all be honest, okay? Those of us on this webinar right now, and you, Catherine, at FIA, none of us could get a job, a real job, like in a for-profit. We had to just get in a nonprofit where, they're not really very much quality people, and of course their pay reflects that. And then we have volunteer board members who are, powerful experts or whatever in their own jobs. And I once had a board member say to me while I was doing a session, not on neuroscience, but on something else, as a consultant, supposedly hired because I was an expert. And he said to me after he patted me on the arm, well, Missy, I've served on more boards than you are old. That's why he was disagreeing with everything I said. And I said back to him, but I'm right and you're wrong. And here's the Internal Revenue Service handout from the U.S. federal government to show you. So I think we've built a sector and a world and a wherever right now where we are not considered in the nonprofit sector adequately, competent, no particular body of knowledge, etc. And so we've got to start saying to our boss, no, wait. I've read 6 books on this. I read books that aren't even on fundraising, or I, subscribe to magazines that are major business leader magazines in Australia. I know my stuff, and there is research. So one of the things we have to do is continually anticipate the barriers. It's the same thing we do when we're fundraising. We have to make this as easy as possible for our donors to be able to do something. We don't say, send us a check, pull out your own envelope, and get a stamp. We provide it. So we have to be the same way with our boss. Your boss is going to, say blah, 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 because he or she doesn't really think there's a body of knowledge. It's much more about personal opinion. Well, start educating him or her right now. They're not going to read everything you do, but you can start saying, this is from one of the business leaders of the world. This is whatever. And you do the same thing with your program staff, and you do the same thing with board members at board meetings. You do not let them start out by saying, I have some ideas. You don't care what their ideas are. They aren't experts in this. So we fundraisers damn well better be the experts. And that means we got to read stuff.
Thank you, Simone. Amy has sent in a question. Where can I find examples of effectively using this information?
So you can look at, let's see. So Tom Ahern's multiple books actually show examples, and his newsletter shows examples, and shows examples and tells you who the organizations are. You should do the same thing with Jeff Brooks. And he is actually working with Mosianic there in Australia. And Jeff has books where, he's showing us what works because it worked with his clients, the organizations he's worked with, etc. Mal Warwick, who's long retired, but his books do that sort of thing. If you go to Sophie, SOFII.org, Sophie is the showcase of innovation and innovation and inspiration. It's on the net. It was founded by Ken Burnett in the UK, and it is a compilation of examples of best practice in fundraising, donor communications, etc., from all over the world. And many years ago, like, ads and things like that from the 1930s and 40s. So those are just a few places.
Great. Well, if there are no other questions from our attendees this morning, Simone, thank you again for such a terrific webinar. We're grateful for you sharing your expertise with us today.
Well, I had fun, and I hope people find it useful.
Great. And if anyone does have any questions that they think of after this webinar or having listened to the recording of the webinar, if you'd like to send any questions through to me, Simone, would you be happy to answer those at a later date?
I would indeed.
That would be wonderful. So thanks very much again. I just wanted to let our listeners know that the webinar on the 23rd of May will return to its normal time of 12 p.m. through to 1. And the May webinar will be presented by Julie Johnson, EMFIA at O'Keefe and Partners. Julie will be presenting on future-focused fundraising, bringing together the best of old and new approaches, which is a webinar not to be missed as well. So head to the website for more details and to register. Thank you again for sharing your time with us today, and thank you again, Simone, and to Go Fundraise for such a wonderful webinar. We wish you all a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye, Simone.